what Carrie is sharing, what she just did, is she's sharing the composites or the constituents of a hearing. You're gathering yourself to your own hearing. Yet it's outside of yourself, but it's inside through integration. So there's no way to say, give me the format to the Constitution. I want it in a book form. You not realize the Constitution is God's some assembly required. It's everything of the song. Your Constitution is your vibrational song of present moment. It can't be anything more than that. You would not have the authority to go into the courtroom, and I mean this in the most innocent way. If I get my book of song and he's like, oh, Ken broke down the Constitution, I'm going to read this, you wouldn't have the authority. You'd be laughed out of the system because you're not realized as it. All you're doing is regurgitating something that you have not become. The whole process of integration is based on maturation from immaturity. Immaturity wants to speak and say something that it does not know. Maturity is silent because it knows what it is.
It need not say a
thing. It need not say a thing. And that's the difference. And that's what I'm trying to say, that even the language of the Song of the Sea, the collective is now, the Song of the Sea is very deep. You cannot hear it. It's inaudible because it's in such a deep place that it translates as thought, going back to Heather. That's what that's what we're moving into. But the realization of sonar is solely dependent because sonar is defining your own depth, but that's based on what you're hearing. So I wanted to touch on that a little bit. I know for those of you that didn't listen to what yesterday was, I went pretty much in depth in Shema, and because Shema is connected to, I wanted to break down those words, and we'll do it next week because I'm not rushing this. It's impossible to rush, and that's why I so appreciate what Carrie just did on the vibration, what she's doing. That it's, again, this isn't reading something. I can't go in and say, let me read you my Constitution. My Constitution is based on the integration and the study of myself, right? And are you going to the first occurrence of Shema?
I was going to look up the Shema.
Oh, the Shema. Okay, so yeah, do that. Look up the Shema because it's important, because the Shema as a hearing is a constitutional sounding. And I wanted to kind of come from this because I'm only sharing from overflow today. I don't want to go too much into anything other than the ear, because unless we know the ear well of knowing how to hear, we'll never know how to speak, and therefore we'll never know the way of silent thought, most of us. But again, the ear and silent thought are based on the still of the docket, or the dock, because that's the still waters called pond. It's where we get the word pondering from. It's just like you're in your still place, and that's purpose. You cannot step away from the bitter to get to the sweet. You can't go right to the sweet without the bitter. You can't get your proverbial sea legs without the time in on the vessel. You have to learn the integration of bringing provision onto the boat while it's in its ponderance, or in its conception, in its infantile stage. There's no heart, there's no error in that. That's the lovely in this, is like, but the power is in the innocence of where you see yourself. Ponderance is but an expression of allowing yourself to prepare your vessel before you go into the great expanse called the Sea of Humanity. And this is where we learn the language of integration, of how to assemble your vessel, because this is the language of crossing. And this is what this is why we're here. We are all learning the language of transgression to know the law of crossing. Hopefully we can do it in one life cycle. It's got really nothing to do to go into the court system, to battle the court system. It's got nothing to do with that. For us that have equated it as a sum resolve of our own summit, as our own mountaintop experience, that is going to be given a gift or a reward based while still in the expression of time. Something is coming in to say, who are these people that transgress the law by fulfilling it? They translated themselves while still in the expression of time. Who are these ones? They are now given the dimension out of time. That's the law of the Constitution. You've performed the duty of standing. What is the job description? Well, while in the space of time, you've steadied your stand. You've allowed yourself to know what it is. Has anyone been on a boat on a boat per se that didn't even maybe overnight, that it's going like you go out and you're not coming back in for a couple of days. Okay. For you that have done this, you know the feeling, especially when you go into weather. You're going into a situation that is based on the wind. That's the language of the Ruach. You're going into something that is of a more of a nature. Whether it's a mountaintop experience, you're still in your being. You are not in control of the nature around you.
Or are you?
Well, right, or are you?
Or are you?
Because right, so there's a difference there. But I'm coming from the innocence. Carrie's taking it right to the poking a hole in the ceiling.
No, it's because what I was talking about in our earlier session about the outside world reflecting our inner reality.
Well, that's what we're going to is we will control nature, because nature, it's a law of exchange that wants to be stewarded gently.
It responds to us.
It responds to us, absolutely. And Roy, you demonstrated that when we were up at Unicorn Meadow and the smoke came in, and we have the way of the whisper, the way of wind whispering. We have the way to move elements. We have that ability, but it's not to manipulate, and it's definitely not to contort, distort, or bring disturbance. It's everything of balance and harmony by the frequency of your heart. That's the law of the sea. So we know that when we go on the boat, like I've spent a good part of my younger year on the boat, and we would go out. I was gone for 6 months out of the year, and I mean we only came into harbor once every month, so we were gone for a while. So I knew what it was. The difference is that we were talking about this morning about acclimating. I came back and I was with a really good skipper. I was with a really good. It was my tutoring was on the boat. And the expression was, these are the boundaries, Ken. You're on a boat that's got a 20-foot beam and you're 60 foot in length from bow to stern. Everything beyond the gun rails or the cap rails is death. Know that. So you learned the law of sea very quickly to say anything out of the boundaries of this is death. And especially dependent on night and day. Because if you go over at night, in high seas, and I was on the west coast of the Charlottes in Alaska, you just disappear. And a lot of that language is solely dependent on my ability to navigate myself on that boat. I spent many years on the boat, and I became one with the boat. I became very harmonized with the essence of the boat, where Greg, the gentleman that taught me this, we became so familiar, like back to Heather, that there was very little speaking on the boat because we were in harmony and rhythm. We knew he knew the boat so well. He taught me to integrate with him as the skipper and the master, and taught me the ways of the vessel where it was just flow. It's that language. But I had to learn my own sea legs. That at first it was awkward because the boat was continually in motion, and I came from land, so I was already formed to my job description, that I was already rigid. I'm trying to broaden our imagination. Like we've been so formed to a language of rigid that we've lost the language of flow. We've lost the essence of the law of the sea. And so I'm trying to broaden this. Like, don't be restrained, especially what Carrie is sharing you, to be limited to your expression. Allow your flow of where you are. Show me your sea legs based on what you've done thus far in your job description of your own song. And it took many years for the realization that I became more fluid on the boat than I was when I came to land. Actually, when I came back to the land, it took me almost 6 weeks to acclimate. I became land sick. I was land sick for the first 2 weeks for sure. I couldn't be in a bank. I couldn't drive my car because my eyes were moving based on equilibrium. The equilibrium translated me through the transgression what the law of the sea was, because I integrated it as one standing. Whether it moved, whether it pitched, whether it yaw, whether it rolled, I was in formation to it. It wasn't dictating to me. It was allowing me the opportunity to come into resonance to its flow. And that took many years for me to realize that I was more fluid on the boat than I was on land. And it really taught me some amazing lessons of integration. Whether I was sleeping, whether I was cooking, doesn't matter where I was, my whole body was shifting, always in motion. I always was learning to navigate my hips, my feet, position, and I didn't even think about it. You realize. But in that language, when I came back into town, there would be people that would see the influence of what I was doing for 6 months of the year, mostly monetary. We were very successful. We were one of the top 10 boats on the coast, and I came back at a very young age with lots of influence in a monetary gain. And they would see that, but they didn't want to see the work that went into the many years, because I didn't even share that. All they saw was a vehicle. They saw, a billfold. They saw travel. They saw things that I was doing, but they weren't really looking. And there's a reason why I'm saying this, because this is the integration of what the legal term is as becoming the law. All of us are being schooled in what it is of right standing. That's the word for lawyer. It means upright. And so we're learning upright to know what law is, to redefine law as one standing, as one sovereign being, as one nation, as one body of water. And so I had many friends that were going, man, like, I'm seeing this influence that you're carrying and it intrigues me and I want that. And I'm like, I don't think you really do. I don't think you know what's behind the scenes. You're seeing the upfront. You're seeing my face. You're seeing me relaxed. You're seeing me in the place of my reward, benefiting from my reward. And I'm being very loose with that. I'm being another expression that what I had to do to integrate that expression. Comprehend that, right? This is the work and the due diligence and all you're seeing is but a mere expression of that in one moment. And I'm going to go home tonight, I'm going to go to bed. But all you're seeing is something that you're desiring. And if that's truly what you want, then I can make some requests. And I did that many times for people, friends of mine, that saw the influence. And I will tell you this, I stopped doing it because all my friends became my enemies.
Isn't that the truth? Wow.
All of them. Because they didn't know how at that point of their life. I started when I was 15 on a boat, and I went into my mid-20s until I got married and had my first child. But it taught me respect for the sea. It taught me how to condition the boat, to always be prepared, to know that we prepare in the sun and we're always ready for the storm. It taught me that the language of shoring everything, that I don't want to be having to go deal with an issue when we're put into a 20-foot sea. That's not when you do that. You do that when you're in your safe harbor. When the boat is at the docket, you're assembling everything that's necessary to make that seaworthy. It's no different than the language. When you go out to the sea, you are sound. Everything of this language is spherical by nature. It brings a resolve to itself through the conclusion of your feet will measure your head. Ouroboros language, but that's the language. It's all spherical by nature. It's seeking your resolve based on what you're hearing, that you are articulate that language. And I want to go into Ozen, the language of the ear, to know what equilibrium is, because it's the language of balance.